Hello everyone, how's it going? So, this newest episode of Boruto came out, and a chunk of it has the story of, it's a flashback actually, about the day when Naruto became Hokage. Now, for those of you who don't know, that section of the episode was actually a chapter, or a mini chapter, I guess, drawn by Kishimoto about the day that Naruto became Hokage, and it was later animated and released as an OVA as part of a special feature, okay, in the Boruto movie DVD, or the Boruto box set, or whatever you want to call it. It was released with the Boruto movie as a special feature. And so that OVA came out about a year ago. I don't know, I haven't rewatched the OVA, so I don't know if they just straight up copied and pasted the OVA onto this episode to save themselves budget and time. Although it would make sense if they did that, you know, just for resource purposes. So that part of the episode is something that if you're a Boruto or a Naruto fan, you probably should have already seen it by now. That being said, you know, it's still a fun story. It's a fun little sort of setup to Himawari awakening her Byakugan for the first time. Her stuffed animal gets ripped apart, and she gets pissed, and she actually KOs Naruto. So Himawari is Hokage level at this point. I'm kidding, of course. You can tell by the way that Naruto's eyes are drawn that this is supposed to be, it's intended as a gag. She even takes out Kurama while she's at it. Also, and I think this is new, it turns out that the reason for why Naruto wouldn't wake up that morning of the ceremony was because he was busy partying and getting wasted with his friends the previous night. So, yeah, it's like, okay, you added a little bit more of information there that Naruto just, you know, partied too hard and, you know, he came home drunk. So yay for alcoholism and children abusing their siblings and their parents. Boruto's reflection on this is that he will never make Himawari angry ever again. Konohamaru steps in for Naruto in the Hokage hooding ceremony, and that's pretty much it. But the context and the thing that surrounds this OVA or this little flashback is very different, and there's some expansion there because Himawari is sick. And what this does is that it sets up some pretty cool moments for the Naruto household and for the Naruto family to spend quality time with each other, which is really cool, which is something that we haven't gotten, I think, very often since the Boruto series started. And so just like her daughter, Hinata gets really angry and kicks out Naruto and Boruto out of the house because they were making too much racket, which is a pretty new side of Hinata, to be honest, like that motherly side that sort of just has her as the disciplinarian. It's not, you know, something that is very common for Hinata's character, at least not that we know of. So that was interesting. And then by the end, she goes and looks at this picture that they took after the hooding ceremony for Naruto. And I'm curious if that's actually Naruto or if that's still Konohamaru. I'm assuming it's Naruto, but it would be funny if it were Konohamaru. I'm sorry kids, but we had to leave your father out of the picture because he was too busy fantasizing over Iruka-sensei. Iruka-sensei! Anyway, Naruto takes Boruto to the Ichigo and Rukia ramen shop. Ichiraku ramen. And the place has changed. It's gotten bigger. It's made more money now. It's more famous, I guess. Partly, I think, because of Naruto. And it would have been nice to have another flashback to the first date for Naruto and Hinata because it's referenced in the episode when Naruto is talking to Boruto about it, but we don't really get anything. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Kishimoto drew the first date. It wasn't a chapter, it was very brief, a couple of pages, but it would have been nice to see that. Instead, we get like a sort of an eating competition between Chocho and Choji, and we find out that the queen of gluttony, the person who has the record for eating the most bowls of ramen at 46. Well, first it's young Choji, then it's adult Choji, and then finally it's Hinata. And that actually stemmed, I think, from a joke back when Naruto Shippuden was airing. There were these little segments after each episode that were technically considered filler by a lot of people, but I mean, there's some sense of canon in them now, at least, because it's like they were making a joke out of like who can eat the most ramen. And by the end of that little segment, it was revealed that Hinata loves ramen. And I remember reading a comment about that said that it makes sense for why she would eat so much. It's because the weight has to go somewhere. Anyway, I want to give a shout out to Michael Vivian for sending me a link to an interview done by Shonen Jump. I'll leave the link in the description. The interview is basically Shonen Jump interviewing Masashi Kishimoto, the creator of Naruto, and also Mikio Ikemoto. If you don't know who Mr. Ikemoto is, he's basically the person in charge of the art for the new Boruto manga that comes out on a monthly basis. So it's a back and forth between them, and the interview isn't really that long, but I think there's some considerable amount of insight to gain from it, because as I've said before, the interviews that I've read with Kishimoto, I've noticed that he has a tendency to answer questions, but at the same time, answer them by giving some implicit meaning. Like you kind of have to read in between the lines because he's not a very direct person, especially when it comes to controversial things. So that's basically what I wanted to share with you because it's apparent from this interview what Kishimoto's train of thought was in regards to starting the series of Boruto. It's obvious from this interview. And you can read the entire interview to get the full details, but I'm just going to go through the points that stood out to me, okay? You know, the gist of it. So basically what happened was that Kishimoto noticed Mr. Ikemoto after he won a manga contest. He saw his work and he thought, hey, I want to hire an assistant to work on Naruto with me, so hire him. So he hired Ikemoto, and he's been working with Kishimoto, closely with Kishimoto for, I think, over 15 years at this point. Ikemoto started around chapter 7 of Naruto, so he was involved very, very early on. He even said at one point he actually designed Haku, Sabusa, and the third Hokage's battle gear. And the reason for why he decided to let him design Sabusa and Haku was because at that point in the story, the planning stages have begun to go into the Chunin exam arc, and Kishimoto felt overwhelmed because he knew that he needed to introduce a lot of new characters and a lot of new designs. So they worked together for a very long time. Obviously, they're super close, okay? And so when it was time for Kishimoto to end Naruto, and he says it in the interview, I literally ended it the way that I wanted to end it. Like, you know, I did everything I wanted to with the series, but Shueisha came in and asked Kishimoto, do you have any plans to continue the series? They were like, could there be a possibility of you developing a sequel for us? And Kishimoto, and this is why I really respect the man, he said, no, I'm not up for it. I'm not going to be at the steering wheel. I'm not going to be at the helm and be calling the shots again. To me, that's a stage of my life that is pretty much over and done with. You know, I've done what I wanted to do. Kishimoto said, no, I don't want to do it. But he said the only, I guess, one of the requirements for this happening for another Naruto project would be if Ikemoto is actually involved with the new project. That was Kishimoto's request, okay? Now, here's the thing, and this is where you kind of have to read in between the lines because it gets kind of tricky. Ikemoto said that he did not want to do a sequel. He did not want to do a Naruto sequel. He said no, 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 no. And the reason for why he didn't want to do a sequel was because he was afraid that people would compare the sequel to the original, which is the most normal thing to happen whenever that happens. You know, it's exactly what's happening now. It's what happens with movies. We always compare the sequel to the original. It's almost like human nature. So he didn't want to do that, okay? Now, he was convinced to do it because, I don't know if this was Shueisha or somebody told him, don't worry, it's not going to be a sequel. It's going to be a reboot. Now, the difference between a sequel and a reboot is that a sequel is a continuation of something. A sequel is a part 2, part 3, part 4 of something, okay? Something that comes after. A reboot is a new beginning of something. A reboot, the best example that I can give you of a reboot is the Spider-Man movies. We have Tobey Maguire, we have Andrew Garfield, and now we have Tom Holland. Those are reboots because it's kind of like, it's a different take on the Spider-Man origin story, but they're not sequels to each other. So Ikemoto said, if it's a reboot, okay, fine, I'll do it. In the interview, he says, by the time I got the script, by the time I got the story, I was like, oh, crap, it's actually a sequel. So by the time he got to see the story, he was already committed. He had already said yes, and by that point, and he says it in the interview, it was already too late. Now I'm going to read you this quote from Kishimoto from the last section of the interview because it's absolutely crucial, okay? It basically explains why Boruto even exists. Boruto not the character because Boruto is in chapter 700, but Boruto the series. Why the series even came to be in the first place. This is Kishimoto saying this. He says, so Mikio Ikemoto, agreed to do it, and that's how the serialization started. I just wish he had been able to make his debut with a Cosmo series. In other words, Kishimoto really wanted Ikemoto to have his own manga. He says, he received 600 pieces of fan mail from that one shot, and for it not to make it or for it not to be published is unfortunate. Kishimoto goes on to say, if he wasn't going to create his own series, then I wanted him to get published even if it was continuing my work. The biggest reason is because I want to read what he creates. So there you have it, folks. The reason for why the Boruto manga series came to be was basically because Kishimoto was being nice. He wanted his assistant to get published, and because he couldn't do it, he actually said, you can continue my work, and that'll get you published, in a sense. And you know, sometimes being nice has its consequences. And for us, it's Boruto. Let me know what you think about this piece. Comment down below. Like the video if you did. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And I'll catch you guys later. Bye.